The massive space station stretched out like a gleaming city among the stars. Kepler Academy was famous throughout the galaxy as the best place to study different alien species. Today was special because they were getting their very first human student. Jake Thompson stepped off the transport ship, carrying just one small bag. He was 20 years old, tall and lean, with brown hair and an easy smile. Back home in Colorado, he studied engineering and loved hiking in the mountains. Now he was millions of miles from Earth, but he felt excited rather than scared. The moment he walked through the airlock doors, a crowd of alien students surrounded him. They had been waiting for hours to meet their first human. "Hello there, human Jake," came a high-pitched voice. The speaker was Vex, who looked like a giant praying mantis but walked upright. His 4 arms moved constantly as he talked, and his big compound eyes sparkled with curiosity. "We have read so much about your kind. Tell us everything." Next to Vex stood Nala, who was completely different. She looked like she was made of living crystal, about 7 feet tall and glowing with soft blue light that shifted and changed as she moved. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes. "Our computer files say humans are very ordinary," she said politely. "Just regular carbon-based creatures. Nothing special at all." The third alien was Kor, who was short and thick like a barrel. His skin was gray and bumpy, and he wore a strange mask over his face that made soft hissing sounds. "That mask helps him breathe our air," Vex explained quickly. "Kor comes from a world with different gases." Kor nodded and added, "Yes, and our records show Earth is a Class M world. Very safe and comfortable. Perfect weather, no dangers, very peaceful." Jake laughed and shifted his bag to his other shoulder. "Well, Earth's not too bad, I guess. The gravity is a bit heavy, maybe 20% more than what you guys call standard. And yeah, our sun throws out quite a bit of radiation, but you learn to deal with it. Just wear sunscreen and don't stay out too long." The 3 aliens looked at each other with worried expressions. Professor Helix, their teacher, was standing nearby listening to everything. She was an Aquarian, which meant she looked almost human, except for her blue-green skin and the way she seemed to flow when she moved, like she was underwater. She quickly wrote something on her electronic tablet. New species often had problems with translation, so maybe Jake's words didn't mean what they sounded like. "Come along," Nala said, her crystal body chiming softly. "Let us show you where you will sleep. Tomorrow we start our classes about how different species survive in various environments. You will find it fascinating." As they walked through the station's corridors, Jake tried to make friendly conversation. The walls were covered with screens showing different alien worlds, and students from dozens of species hurried past them carrying books and equipment. "This place is incredible," Jake said, looking around. "It reminds me of the time I went camping in Yellowstone and got caught in a lightning storm. I was struck by lightning, actually, but it wasn't too bad. Just knocked me down for a few seconds. The tent caught fire, though, so I had to sleep under the stars. Beautiful night, really." He was just trying to be friendly and share a story, but behind him, his 3 new friends had stopped walking entirely. Vex's 4 arms had frozen in mid-gesture. Nala's blue glow had dimmed almost nothing. Even Kor's breathing mask seemed to be hissing more quietly. "You were struck by lightning?" Nala whispered. "And you survived?" added Vex, his voice much higher than before. "Well, sure," Jake said, turning around with a confused smile. "I mean, it hurt quite a bit, and I was sore for a few days, but lightning strikes aren't usually fatal if they don't hit you just right. Happens to people all the time back home. My cousin got hit twice while playing golf." Professor Helix had stopped writing and was now staring at Jake with all 3 of her eyes wide open on her tablet. Earth's files still showed it as a peaceful, safe world with gentle weather and no significant dangers. Your cousin plays recreational activities during electrical storms?" she asked slowly. "Oh, you have to be careful," Jake said quickly, not wanting them to think humans were reckless. "Most people come inside when the lightning gets really bad. We're not crazy or anything." But as they continued toward the dormitory, his new friends were beginning to wonder what kind of peaceful world created people who talked about lightning strikes like other species talked about light rain. And this was just their first conversation. It was Jake's third day at the academy, and today they were studying how different species survived in harsh environments. The environmental lab was huge, filled with machines that could create any kind of dangerous condition you might find on alien worlds. Professor Helix had explained that they would experience a small, safe amount of space radiation, just enough to see how their protective suits worked. Everything was going perfectly until it wasn't. The containment system that held the radiation made a loud cracking sound. Warning lights started flashing red everywhere. Then came the screaming sound of alarms that made everyone cover their ears. Containment breach. Containment breach. The computer's voice was cold and mechanical, but you could hear panic in Professor Helix's voice when she grabbed the microphone. Radiation breach. All students to emergency shelters now. Her voice boomed through every speaker in the room. Heavy metal doors started slamming shut automatically, sealing off sections of the lab. What happened next was like a nightmare in slow motion. A wave of deadly radiation burst out of the broken containment unit. You couldn't see it, but everyone could feel it hitting them like an invisible wall of fire. Vex, the insect-like student, dropped to the floor instantly. Smoke started rising from his hard, shell-like skin, and he wasn't moving. Nala, the crystal girl, made a sound like breaking glass as cracks appeared all over her body. She threw herself behind a thick lead wall, but she was already hurt badly. Core's breathing mask started making horrible grinding noises, then stopped working entirely. He fell down gasping, trying to breathe the station's air that was poison to his species. Jake was standing right in the middle of the room when the radiation hit him. The invisible wave slammed into his body, and he stumbled backward, feeling dizzy. His skin started turning red, and he felt a familiar burning sensation spreading across his arms and face. It reminded him of that vacation in Mexico, when he fell asleep on the beach without sunscreen and got the worst sunburn of his life. While emergency systems screamed around him, Jake squinted through the chaos and saw something that made his heart stop. Nala was behind her lead barrier, but it wasn't thick enough. She was writhing in pain, her crystal body flickering like a dying light bulb. Without even thinking about it, Jake ran straight toward her. The radiation got stronger with every step, making his skin burn worse, but he didn't stop. He scooped Nala up in his arms. She was surprisingly light, and carried her to the nearest emergency shelter. Her crystal body was hot to the touch and crackling with small electrical sparks. He set her down safely, then looked back at the lab. Vex was still lying motionless in the middle of the radiation field. Jake took a deep breath and ran back in. This time was worse. His skin started forming blisters, and his eyes were watering so badly he could barely see. But he grabbed Vex under his forearms and dragged him to safety just as the emergency containment systems finally kicked in and stopped the radiation leak. Hours later, Jake sat in the medical center's waiting room. The place looked like a war zone. Alien doctors rushed everywhere, speaking in panicked voices. Through the glass doors, he could see his 3 friends connected to machines that beeped and hummed, keeping them alive. Nala's crystal body was covered in a special healing gel, and parts of her were still cracked. Vex was in some kind of regeneration chamber, his burned shell slowly growing back. Core had been given a completely new breathing system after his old one was destroyed. Jake had found a small tube of aloe vera in his bag, the same stuff he used for sunburns back home. He was rubbing on his arms, which looked like he'd spent too long at the beach. His face was red too, but the burning sensation was already starting to fade. Dr. Senna, the head doctor, came out of the treatment room. She had purple skin and tentacles instead of hair, and right now all her tentacles were shaking. She was holding a scanner that showed Jake's vital signs, and she kept looking at it like it was broken. "Human Jake," she said, and her voice was barely a whisper. "According to these readings, the amount of radiation you were exposed to should have killed you immediately. Your cells should have stopped working. Your DNA should have been completely destroyed. How are you still alive?" Jake looked up from his tablet, where he'd been reading about radiation poisoning to better understand what his friends were going through. "Really? It didn't feel that bad. Kind of like this time I was mountain climbing in Colorado and got caught in a solar storm. The radiation made me pretty sick for a day or two, but it wasn't life-threatening or anything." Dr. Senna's three eyes got so wide that Jake worried they might fall out her head. Her tentacles stopped shaking and went completely still. "You climb mountains during solar storms?" she asked. For fun, Jake realized he might have said something wrong. "Well, I didn't plan to get caught in the storm. But when you're that high up, you can't exactly climb down fast enough to avoid it. You just have to deal with it and keep going." The doctor sat down heavily in the chair across from him, still staring at the scanner readings that said Jake should be dead. The news about Jake spread through the space station faster than anyone could have imagined. Within days, every student, teacher, and staff member had heard about the human who walked through deadly radiation like it was sunshine. But that was just the beginning. The second incident happened during atmospheric studies class. They were learning about different air mixtures that various alien species needed to survive. The lab had dozens of gas tanks connected to a complex system of pipes and valves. Professor Helix was explaining how even small changes in air composition could be deadly when disaster struck again. A valve connecting to the hydrogen sulfide tank broke completely. The poisonous gas started pouring into the room in thick, yellow clouds. Most species would die within minutes of breathing it. The emergency alarms went off, and students started collapsing before they could even reach their breathing masks. Jake was standing near the broken valve when it happened. The smell hit him like a punch in the face. Absolutely horrible, like 1,000 rotten eggs mixed with sewage. He covered his nose with his shirt and ran toward the emergency shut-off controls. While his classmates fell unconscious around him, Jake worked alongside Professor Helix to seal the breach. His eyes were watering and he kept coughing, but he stayed conscious and functional. "This smells terrible," he complained. "But it's not as bad as that time our septic tank backed up at home. That lasted for 3 days. By the time they got the gas leak stopped, half the class was in the medical center. Jake just asked if he could open some windows to air out the room." The third incident was even more shocking. They were studying gravity fields in a physics lab, using a machine that could create different levels of gravitational pull. Students had experienced what it felt like to live on worlds with heavy or light gravity. Something went wrong with the controls. Instead of creating a gentle 1.5 G field for everyone to walk around in, the machine suddenly jumped to 8 G, 8 times normal gravity. The crushing force was so strong it bent the titanium support beams holding up the ceiling. Equipment crashed the floor, and part of the roof collapsed. Emergency teams rushed to the lab, expecting to find everyone crushed to death. Instead, they found Jake trapped under a pile of metal debris, calmly reading his physics textbook. He was pinned down and couldn't move, but he was completely conscious and seemed more bored than hurt. "Hey, there," he said when they found him. "This is taking a while. The gravity reminds me of this time I went deep-sea diving in the Mariana Trench. The pressure down there is pretty intense, but you get used to it after a while." The rescue workers just stared at him. The Mariana Trench was the deepest part of Earth's oceans. The pressure there would instantly crush any known alien species, like an empty can. After Jake was pulled out with just some bruises, his 3 friends decided they needed to do some serious research about this peaceful world called Earth. Nala, now recovered from her radiation burns, spent every free moment in the station's computer library. What she discovered made her crystal body dim with pure terror. She called Core and Vex to meet her in their dorm's common room, where she had spread out dozens of data files about Earth. "Look at this," she whispered, her voice shaking like broken glass. "Earth's surface temperature goes from minus 40 degrees to plus 50 degrees Celsius. That's a range that would kill most species instantly." Core's breathing mask made a wheezing sound as he looked at the data. "That cannot be right. No Class M world has temperature swings like that. The computer files must be wrong." "There's more," Nala continued, pulling up another screen. "The radiation levels on Earth's surface are so high, they would be considered hazardous waste on most worlds. Their star puts out deadly ultraviolet rays that would burn through most species' skin in minutes." Vex, whose shell still had scars from the radiation accident, started researching human entertainment. What he found made his compound eyes go wide with disbelief. "Friends," he said, his voice getting high with panic, "I looked up what humans do for fun. They call it recreation, but it's actually a list of suicide methods. He started reading from his tablet. They jump from aircraft at extremely high altitudes with only a piece of fabric to slow their fall. They swim in water so cold it would freeze most species solid within seconds. They climb mountains where the air pressure drops so low that most creatures would suffocate and die. That's impossible, Kor said, but his voice was getting weaker. There's more, Vex continued. They ride down mountains on thin boards at speeds that would be lethal if they crashed. They dive to ocean depths where the pressure would crush our bodies instantly. They run for hours in temperatures hot enough to kill, and they call it exercise. The three friends sat in stunned silence. Nala's blue glow was now barely visible. Kor's breathing sounded labored even with his machine helping him. Vex's 4 arms were trembling. What kind of world creates creatures like this? Nala finally whispered. They were starting to realize that their cheerful, friendly classmate Jake wasn't unusual for a human. He was completely normal. And that thought was more terrifying than anything they had ever imagined. If Jake was average, what were the strong humans like? The worst part was that Jake had no idea how incredible he was. He talked about surviving lightning strikes and radiation exposure, like other species talked about getting caught in the rain. To him, these were just normal parts of life on a world he considered pretty nice. As word spread throughout the academy, one question haunted everyone. If Earth was as dangerous and humans thought it was peaceful, what did they consider a hostile environment? The emergency meeting was called at midnight, when most students were asleep. Professor Helix had spent the entire day reviewing Vex research, cross-checking it with official galactic databases, and running the numbers through multiple computer systems. Every single calculation gave her the same terrifying result. 23 professors from the xenobiology department crowded into the conference room. Some floated in tanks of liquid, others needed special atmospheric suits, and a few couldn't even attend in person. They appeared as holograms because the station's environment would kill them instantly. Professor Helix stood at the front of the room, her blue-green skin noticeably paler than usual. Her flowing movements were jerky and nervous as she activated the main display screen. Earth's data filled the wall behind her in stark, horrifying detail. "Colleagues," she began, her voice shaking slightly, "we have made a catastrophic classification error. Earth is not a Class M world. According to these verified readings, it is Class XI. The room erupted in gasps, clicks, whistles, and sound that had no translation. Several professors nearly fainted. Dr. Keth, a spider-like being from the Outer Rim, had to be given emergency oxygen. Class XI was reserved for death worlds, planets so dangerous that most species needed full environmental suits just to survive a few minutes on the surface. This cannot be possible," wheezed Dr. Torn through his breathing apparatus. "No sentient life could evolve on a Class XI world. The classification system would be meaningless." Professor Helix grimly pulled up the atmospheric data. Earth's atmosphere contains 21% oxygen. For most species, oxygen is a highly dangerous, corrosive gas that burns through organic tissue. It's so reactive that it would literally eat through most of our students' lung structures. She switched to pressure readings. Surface pressure is 14.7 pounds per square inch. That's enough force to crush the delicate tissue structures of 60% of known species. Most of us couldn't survive at that pressure, even with protective suits. The professor stared at the numbers in horror. Dr. Yills, whose species came from a low-pressure moon, calculated quickly and announced, "At that pressure, my body would be compressed to 1/10 its normal size. My organs would be liquefied. The radiation exposure is even worse," Professor Helix continued, switching screens again. "Their star pumps out lethal doses of ultraviolet radiation constantly. Most species would develop fatal cellular damage within minutes of exposure. But humans walk around in it all day. They actually use this deadly radiation to create vitamins in their skin." Dr. Senna, who had been studying Jake's medical scan for weeks, stood up to share her findings. Her tentacles were coiled tightly around her tablet, a sign of extreme stress in her species. "I've been running detailed scans on human Jake every chance I get," she announced. "His bone density is 30% higher than what we consider normal for any species. His bones are so thick and strong that they could probably stop projectile weapons. She switched to muscle fiber analysis. His muscle tissue shows clear adaptation to crushing gravitational forces. Every fiber is designed to function under pressures that would paralyze most beings. His cardiovascular system can operate at blood pressures that would cause most species' hearts to explode. Most shocking of all, she continued, his skin contains natural radiation shielding. He has built-in protection against cosmic rays, ultraviolet radiation, and energy weapons. He's essentially wearing biological armor at all times. While the professors debated whether Jake could possibly be real, the human himself was in his dorm room, completely unaware of the panic he was causing. He had set up a video call with his family back on Earth, and his 3 alien friends were watching from nearby chairs. Jake's mother appeared on screen, standing in what looked like a beautiful garden. She was handling various plants with her bare hands while talking to her son. According to the station's botanical database, Nala realized with growing horror, every single plant visible behind Jake's mother was listed as extremely toxic or lethal on contact. "How was school today, sweetie?" his mother asked, casually picking what appeared to be poison berries and tossing them into a compost bin. "Pretty good, Mom. Had a small accident in one of the labs, but everyone's fine now. I've made some really great friends here." Through the window behind his mother, they could see Jake's younger sister Lily playing in the backyard. The 12-year-old girl was casually doing cartwheels and backflips that required the kind of strength and coordination that would challenge the finest athletes from most alien species. She was also playing in direct sunlight that would give most beings lethal radiation burns. "That's wonderful, dear. Your father is out storm chasing again with his photography group. They're hoping to get some good pictures of that tornado system moving through Kansas." Jake laughed. "Tell him to be careful. Those F4 storms can be pretty dangerous." Vex nearly fell out of his chair. Jake's father hunted tornadoes for entertainment. Tornadoes were atmospheric phenomena that could destroy buildings and lift vehicles into the air. After the call ended, Nala approached Jake very carefully, as if he might accidentally hurt her just by moving too quickly. "Jake," she said softly, "earlier you mentioned that Earth has its moments. What exactly did you mean by that?" Jake looked up from his homework and shrugged casually. "Oh, just the usual stuff. Earthquakes that shake the ground and knock down buildings. Hurricanes with winds that can throw cars around. Volcanic eruptions that bury entire cities in lava. Asteroid impacts that can change the climate for years. Tsunamis that can wash away whole coastlines." He paused, thinking. "Oh, and ice ages every few thousand years that freeze most of the planet solid. Plus the occasional supervolcano eruption or solar flare. Normal planetary stuff." The way Jake casually listed catastrophes that would end civilization on most worlds made Vex antennae droop completely. His 4 arms hung limp at his sides. "You consider these things normal?" Kor whispered through his breathing mask. "Well, yeah," Jake said, looking confused by their reaction. "I mean, every planet has natural disasters, right? That's just how planets work." The 3 friends realized that Jake wasn't just tough by human standards. He was probably average. And if he was average, what were the strong humans like? What were their soldiers like? What were their athletes like? That night, none of the alien students could sleep. The news spread across the galaxy faster than anyone could have imagined. Within days of Professor Helix's emergency report, similar stories started pouring in from every educational institution, research facility, and diplomatic station that had welcomed human exchange students. From the ICE University's Proxima came reports of a human student named Tyler who had walked outside during a blizzard to help repair communication equipment. The temperatures were cold enough to freeze most species solid in seconds, but Tyler just complained that he forgot his jacket and wished he had brought some hot chocolate. The aquatic colleges of Delta 7 reported that their human student, Lisa, had gone swimming in their training pools. These pools were designed to simulate the crushing depths of ocean worlds, with pressure levels that would implode most beings instantly. Lisa swam laps for an hour and said the water pressure reminded her of diving in her local lake back home. From the desert research stations came stories of humans walking across burning sand dunes in temperatures that would cook most species alive, complaining only that it was pretty warm and asking if anyone had a cold drink. The reports were so unbelievable that the Galactic Educational Consortium called an emergency session. Representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered via hologram to hear Professor Helix present her findings about humanity. Standing before the massive assembly, Professor Helix looked small and nervous. Behind her, a giant screen displayed Earth's environmental data, alongside images of Jake and other human students going about their daily lives. "Esteemed colleagues," she began, her voice carrying across space to creatures so different they couldn't even breathe the same air. "We have not made first contact with a typical spacefaring species. What we have discovered are the survivors of one of the most hostile environments in known space. And the most terrifying part is that they consider their world to be pleasant and peaceful." The assembly fell silent. 1,000 different species, from gas-breathing cloud beings to crystalline rock creatures, all stare at the images of humans casually existing in conditions that would kill most of them instantly. These beings evolved in an environment so deadly that their normal daily activities would be considered extreme survival challenges for our finest warriors. Professor Helix continued. Yet they approached these conditions with a casual attitude that we might reserve for a pleasant walk in a safe garden. Back at Kepler Station, Jake's relationship with his 3 alien friends had changed dramatically over the past weeks. What had started as simple curiosity had grown into something much deeper. His friends now watched him with a mixture of awe, fascination, and protective concern, though they were beginning to realize that Jake was probably the least vulnerable being on the entire station. They had started asking him to share stories about Earth during their lunch breaks. What began as innocent questions had turned into sessions where Jake would casually describe activities that left his friends speechless with terror. "Oh, you should see the video my little sister Amy sent me yesterday," Jake said during lunch, pulling out his communication device. Her soccer team had a game during a thunderstorm. The lightning was pretty intense. You could see it striking all around the field. He showed them the video of 12-year-old children running around in an open field while bolts of electricity crashed down around them. The children were laughing and playing as if the deadly electrical storm was just a minor inconvenience. Core nearly choked on his nutrient paste. Your young offspring willingly remained in an electrical storm for recreational activities? Well, yeah, Jake said, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. I mean, it wasn't that bad. They only called off the game when the hail started getting bigger than golf balls. That stuff really hurts when it hits you. Nala's crystal body dimmed almost to darkness as she processed this information. Jake's family had a scale of natural disasters. Some were considered too dangerous for children, while others were just part playing outside. "Your sister?" Vex asked carefully. "How old is she?" "Amy just turned 11. She's pretty tough, though. Last month, she fell out of a tree and broke her arm, but she climbed back up to get her frisbee before going to hospital." The 3 aliens exchanged looks of pure horror. An 11-year-old human child had more pain tolerance than most adult members of their species. As the weeks passed, Jake's reputation spread throughout the academy. Students from dozens of species would gather just to hear him tell stories about Earth. What he described as normal childhood experiences sounded like mythical tales of heroic survival. He'd talk about camping, which apparently involved deliberately going into wilderness areas filled with dangerous predators and surviving for days with minimal equipment. He described swimming, which meant submerging yourself in vast bodies of water where you could drown, freeze, or be eaten by sea creatures. He explained sports, which seemed to be ritualized combat, where humans deliberately crash into each other at high speeds, yet somehow rarely died. The most disturbing part was Jake's complete inability to understand why these activities seemed dangerous to everyone else. When Nala asked him about mountain climbing, he spent 20 minutes enthusiastically describing how he climbed rocks faces thousands of feet high, where a single mistake would mean falling to his death, and he talked about it like it was the most fun thing in the world. "The view from the top is incredible," he said, showing them pictures of himself standing on narrow ledges with nothing but empty air below him. "Plus, the thin air really gets your heart pumping. It's such a rush when you can barely breathe and your muscles are burning, but you push through anyway." Vex realized that humans actively sought out conditions that would kill his species, and they did it for entertainment. The story of humanity spread beyond the academy and eventually reached every corner of the galaxy. The tale was always the same. Humans were nearly indestructible beings who had evolved in conditions so harsh that their normal existence was a miracle of survival, yet they had no idea how remarkable they were. Professor Helix's final report to the Galactic Council became one of the most studied documents in xenobiological history. Her conclusion was both fascinating and terrifying. Humans represent the most successful adaptation to extreme conditions ever discovered in our galaxy. They are, in the most literal sense, the monsters that other monsters would fear if those monsters could comprehend what they were looking at. Fortunately for the peace and stability of the galaxy, humans themselves cannot comprehend their own extraordinary nature. They have evolved in hell and called a home, developed a constitution of legendary warriors, and consider themselves ordinary. This combination of incredible capability and complete humility may be the most remarkable thing about them. Jake continued his studies, completely unaware that his casual existence had fundamentally changed how the galaxy viewed the concept of survival and resilience.